Hi, welcome back to the Crafty Author. So now we're going to work on sashing. I get a lot of questions about sashing. So what I'm going to show you here is I have cut from one of my strips, okay, 1 inches. This is a 1-inch strip, and I'm going to put this one on my front. Some people put the 2-inch strip on their front, but I prefer to put it on the back. And I will show you when I'm finished what it looks like. But so you cut a 2-inch strip and then you iron it in half. Okay? So when you're using sashing, you want to put the raw edge, and I'm going to put my 1-inch strip on the front of the block. You want to put your raw edge against the edge here, like so. You do not have to pin it. But if you're not real familiar with how to do this process, then I would highly suggest pinning. Just makes it go a little bit smoother, okay? So I'm just going to pin for demonstration's sake here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2-inch strip and I'm going to flip my block over, and I am going to put, I've got dog hair everywhere. I'm going to put the raw edge against the raw edge where the back of my block is, but line it up with the front. So do you see? It's a sandwich kind of. That's the 1-inch, that's the 2-inch. And then I'm just gonna kind of pin this in place and try not to stab myself, because I am terrible with pins. Just stick it in there. Make sure that that's lined up on the raw edge. Okay. I'm going to pin that in place. And now I have my back and my front on there. And now we're ready to sew it down. So I'm going to start with I'm going to still use my 1/4-inch foot. I'm just going to put it down. I'm going to put my needle down. And I'm going to start sewing 1/4 inch, which will sew the front and the back strip on at the same time. Now you might want to be careful when sewing. You need to go a little bit slow because it can pucker up, and you want to make sure that you're catching the front and the back and that you want to stay even. Otherwise you'll go crooked and you'll just have a crooked strip. I just set my seam on my front, okay, on the front side. I'm not going to do anything with the back side yet, all front side. And I'm just going to give this a good press out, okay, and that's all we're going to do. You're just going to press that front one out, and then you're going to come back to your machine and you're going to grab another one of your blocks. Now mine are in the same, I have to make sure that my backing is going in the same direction, which it is, okay? And I'm just going to butt these 2 blocks up. Now, I prefer to use clips to make sure that my blocks stay even so that they do not move around. Excuse me, and what I mean by that are these little sewing clips. I just clip them on the edge, okay? And I do that because sometimes when you're sewing, things can go awry. You can get your blocks off kilter. So that's why I use that. And I like to make sure that I'm lining up perfectly with my other side. Am I being clear? Probably not. So I want to make sure that my raw edge is lining up with the other raw edge of the block that I'm going to attach. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say here. So I need to move this down a little bit so that I can get in there and make sure that my edges are even, so that when I attach this block, it's not going to be moving all over. Again, you can pin this. I'm not going to. but I'm just going to put my foot down and I'm just going to start sewing 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to follow the edge of my foot along that edge, and I'm going to make sure that my fabric is also lined up along that edge so that I know that I'm getting a perfectly aligned strip on there. Okay, so now that's done, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Ta-da! Our front is done. Now, I like to give mine a little press. It's a personal preference. You don't have to do it, but I like to give it a little press in the front here because it just gives it a little something, I think. Now, the backing. So we can fold this over like this, and that's typically how most people do it. They fold it over, and then they do a straight stitch down, or you can hand stitch it, okay? Or you can do what I do. And what I do is I go ahead and give this a good press, okay? And then I like to fold it over just a tad. I just want to make sure it's going to be big enough, and it is. So I like to just fold it over about 1/4 of an inch, and then I give it a nice little press here. Along my edge. I've done it the other way too. It's fine. It works fine. Whatever is easiest. This is just the way I do mine. Okay? No right or wrong way. And then I just press it down again. I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I will show you what I'm going to do with this. So I am a big fan of decorative stitches on my sewing machine. Love them. I quilt with them all the time. I free motion quilt, but I also prefer, or I also really enjoy using like zigzag stitches or flower stitches. There's all kinds of stitching on your machine that you really should try and incorporate in your quilts because they look amazing when you do. So what I'm going to do is put a foot on my machine first. Is I am going to use a zigzag stitch. Now this particular zigzag stitch actually stitches in 3 different places. So it's not just a zigzag stitch that could quite possibly come a little bit loose. But I'm just going to line up right there at the edge of my quilt, or my block. And I'm going to start sewing along the edge. And I need to concentrate so that I can actually see if I'm in line. I don't want to go off the rails and be all crooked here. This very nicely. Stitching it down. And now that part is finished. And you can see I have a nice decorative stitch on the front. And I could have used coordinating for thread, but for this tutorial I'm actually just going to use what I have here in this cream colored. And this is what it looks like on the back. Just adds a little more decoration to it. Okay, so we're going to repeat the sashing process because I know this is tough. So we're going to grab one of our blocks, going to take a 1-inch strip, we're going to grab a 2-inch strip. Now remember, I've already had this prepared in advance. Oh, it is. I could do the row too. So we're going to lay that down. And then we're going to lay the other one down, okay? Raw sides to the edge, right? I just laid them down together like so. I'm going to just pop in a couple pins just to hold it in place. And then we're going to just start sewing again. I'm going to change my foot because I really, I love my 1/4 inch foot. It just helps me to stay on track. So just put it under the machine and start sewing. Going to line our edges up, making sure that if we have a back that has a direction, a pattern on the back, then we need to be mindful of that, but otherwise we're going to be good to go here. Now I'm going to just make sure that I am lined up with my fabric. This takes a little bit of adjusting, so be patient. So I'm ready. I'm going to just start sewing now with my 1/4 inch foot in this little ditch area. Make sure that we're lined up. It open on the front like I like to do. Like I said, that's a step that you do not need to do. That's a preference of mine. Oh, looky. You can see I'm off. See how off I am on this block? And that's because I didn't sew right. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go in and I'm going to have to rip this out and I'm going to have to redo it, because we want to make sure that those blocks are pretty even. So the first block that we sewed was very even. It's pretty right on. This one is way off. So we wouldn't be able to fix this. I'm glad this happened while we were going through this, because see, it happens to everybody. But we would end up, when we went to square these up, we would end up cutting so much off that it would throw off our whole block, and then we would have to cut the others down just as small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here. I'm going to fix my mistake. I've shown you how to attach sashing, so be mindful when you're doing your sashing. Make sure your blocks are even. I even pinned them or used my clips and they were still off. So make sure that you're careful of that. And then I will be back with another video next week sometime, and we'll start doing we'll attach the rows with sashing as well. Have a wonderful weekend and a great week, and I will see you next time.